Good morning. I walked in this morning, I looked to my right, and I saw my brother James Hastings here this morning. He has not been here for quite some time due to health, and he looks better than ever right now. He fully recovered. Looks good. Glad you're here. If you're visiting with us, we are certainly glad that you're here, and we are studying in the book of Acts, and we are now in chapter 20. Chapter 20. This chapter has what I would call a very interesting worship service. And we'll get to that, and you'll see why here in just a minute. But one verse everyone must know or should know, at least for the defense of the truth. And what verse would that be? I heard some people say verse 7. That's correct. And what's so significant about verse 7? Lord's Supper. We can learn so much about that, and we will get to that. But very interesting chapter here, and let's just get to it. Verse 1. And I'll just stop after the first phrase. And after the uproar was... Remember what that uproar was? It's been 2 weeks, so I'll see if your memory is as good as mine. It was in a theater. Somebody's pocket was being threatened because he was in his line of work, he made money off of certain things. Here we go, I'm ringing some bells. Yeah. Okay, he was a silversmith, and he was making an idol for what god or goddess? Diana, all right? And then they started an uproar, everybody, and they all ended up in the theater, and they wanted to destroy whatever Paul was doing because Paul was preaching truth, and it was causing a problem. It was causing holes to be cut in his pockets, I guess you could say, because he was losing money, and all of a sudden he became a devout worshiper of the goddess Diana. Probably didn't care too much about her before that, except for he made money off of her. I say her, but really there's nothing. It's air, because Diana does not exist. But anyway, so we're here at verse 1. After the uproar was ceased, Paul called unto him the disciples and embraced them and departed to go into Macedonia. And so he's on his way home back to Jerusalem here. He had this present journey had been occurring for several years now. He covered Galatia, Phrygia, and Asia Minor. He preached in Ephesus for 3 years. He planted churches in Philippi and Thessalonica. And so right now we're about to go here. Second, about what he went through and telling them that I've dealt with enemies, I've had to fight with beasts, and all these things. And, he was telling him, I want to be there, but there's a better opportunity right now. The door of opportunity has happened to me. So he did not want them, the Corinthians, to think that he was just leaving them out, but he was departing from them. In verse 2, and when he had gone over those parts and given them much exhortation, he came. Okay, so back to Greece, probably visited another city which was heavy in idolatry. Does anybody remember? He was speaking in the marketplace, and some people heard him and then placed him somewhere else where more people can hear him. I remember that. Mars Hill, very good. Yep, Mars Hill is preaching. Remember, what were they doing? They built temples to all these gods, but one specific temple Paul mentioned. Who was that for? The unknown God, okay? Just in case that we left a God out. God, we're building this temple for you, and we don't know who you are, but just in case, right? And so that's what they did, and so Paul was telling them and teaching them that there is a one true God, and that he had made the earth. He cannot be bound in houses or temples which were made by human hands. And let me ask you this, true or false, they all believed what Paul said. That's false. But true or false, some believe what Paul said. Yeah. Okay. So we have a smaller number. Paul would have loved, and we would have loved, as we live today. We talk about the gospel. We try to teach our friends and family and all those that we love that are not quite there yet, and we try to teach them the truth. You know what? The Bible is right, and I'm going to obey that, but that doesn't happen, right? Does that mean we should quit? Should we give up? The Bible teaches us that there are 4 kinds of soil, right? And there will be different kinds of soil. Jesus also was rejected. And so some accepted it. Some said, some mocked, said, yeah, right. And then some said, you know what? Well, we want to hear a little bit more about this. And some believed. Okay, so that's what happened in Mars Hill. In verse 3, and there in Greece abode 3 months. And when the Jews laid wait for him as he was about to sail into Syria, he purposed to return through Macedonia. Now, what were the Jews doing trying to wait for him? What were they wanting to do? Can't go this way. All right, we have a plot. All right, so somebody else, the Jews are plotting against him, so he had to go another way. Verse 4. And there accompanied him into Asia Sopater of Berea, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus and Secundus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timotheus, and of Asia, Tychicus, and Trophimus, and these going before tarried for us at Troas. So Luke here makes a list of all who was with him. Let me ask you this. Was Luke with him right here, just by reading these 2 verses? Do we know if Luke was with him? Yes. And how do we know that? Us. There you go. There's the pronoun us. So now Luke has included himself with that pronoun. So now he has traveling companions. And look at verse 6. Here's another pronoun. And we, that would include Luke, because he is the writer of the book of Acts, sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. Now that's interesting. Why would the Holy Spirit tell us how many days was it for travel? How many days that he stayed there? Why was that so significant? There's a reason for this. All right, yep, you can read on the very next verse. And this is where we begin a very interesting worship service here in Troas. Verse 7, a verse that you and I, Christians, and generally speaking, know very well about. If you underlined it, highlight it, whatever it is, write it down, put it in the inside of the cover of your Bibles here, so that you know this is one of the verses I can go to for defense right here. Okay, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to do what? Break bread, some binding examples to how worship is to take place today, in the present day. Paul, for some reason, had to abide or decided or chose to be at Troas these certain amount of days to assemble with the disciples, to come together, also to observe the Lord's Supper. And we are told here when this takes place, okay, upon the first day of the week. So we have some evidence here. We have some binding examples here. Now, let's read. No, I'm going to wait just a minute for that. We'll go there in just a second. Well, maybe not. Let's go to, all right, I'll change my mind. 1 Corinthians chapter 16. Let's go there. Okay, we have the same phrase here in 1 Corinthians 16. And remember, the Corinthians, the letter there, Paul is addressing several issues. Okay, what were some of the issues in the church in Corinth, in the congregation at Corinth? Who can give me some problems they were having that Paul had to address? There you go. One was living in sin. He was with his father's wife, and so there's some fornication in there. Now, what does that have to do with the whole congregation? I mean, that's one person that was doing the sinning. What has to do with the whole church at Corinth?
Sort of like a bad apple.
Absolutely, okay? They were boasting, in fact, by tolerating the sin of this young man, okay? Some people say, or get this confused, or misinterpret some things like when, well, nobody's perfect, right? Some of us may be living in sin. Who are we to judge that person? Shame on us, because that's not our job, is it? Do you hear that sometimes? Well, absolutely. So what we have here is that one of their problems is that they were tolerant of sin in the camp. Okay? Well, don't we know that a little leaven does what? Leavens the whole lump. Now, one man is in sin. What is that to say to when another man becomes sinful or starts to live in sin? If we say something to him but not to him, we have a problem, don't we? We have an absolute problem. So we need to get the sin out of the camp. Is that because we judge them and want to shun them and never see them again? Absolutely not. The purpose is for what? To bring them back to the Lord. That's the whole purpose. It's the whole purpose. Some people say fellowship withdrawal is a hateful act, but yet it is another example of what we're supposed to do in the Lord's church. Not to hate that person or to shun that person, but for that person to realize what he or she has done and decide to go back to the Lord, and in order to do that must come back, repent, and ask for forgiveness of the church. And so, therefore, after that happens, the church can now look down on that person and say, you know what? You sinned once before, so you go to the timeout corner every time we have worship. Is that what we're supposed to do? Tough love, yeah. No, we're supposed to forgive as if it absolutely never happened and continue on with our business in the Lord. Is that correct? Absolutely. All right, so that's one of the problems. There was sin in the camp. What was another problem in the church of Corinth? Okay, there it is. All right, they were abusing the Lord's Supper. They were taking it when they were having fellowship meals, and the problem is they were cliquey. They were cliquey. You have some in this congregation who had no money, and you have others in this congregation who had a lot of money. Those who had a lot of money shunned out the ones who did not have the money. And therefore, these people, one problem was they weren't getting fed like they should. Remember, we're supposed to take care of each other in this congregation. If anyone in Fairview is struggling, we're here to help, okay? Don't avoid that. Some people say, well, I don't want to be a bother. And so they decide not to talk to anybody. That's not the purpose of the church. That is a different mindset that we ought not to have, okay? We are here to help each other spiritually and physically, okay? As far as needing anything, if we need anything as far as earthly needs, okay? We're here to help. All right. So they were cliquey, and then after their fellowship meal, then they'll institute the Lord's Supper. But the problem is, remember, it's because they were cliquey, they were not together, okay? They need to assemble together, absorb this as one. We are one family. All right, so we have several things here. We have sexual immorality going on. We have the Lord's Supper being abused. There was another issue at the beginning, 1 Corinthians. Let's go there real quick, and then we'll go back to our chapter 16. Yes, sir. That's right. Verse 11. For it hath been declared unto me of you, my brethren, by them which are of the house of Chloe, that there are contentions among you. Now this I say, that every one of you saith, I am of Paul. People over here saying, well, I've been taught by Paul. There are people over here, well, I've been taught by Apollos. Okay. Well, I've been taught by Cephas. And someone says, well, I myself am of Christ. I'm in the church of Paul. I'm in the church of Apollos. I'm in the church of Cephas. I'm in the church of Christ. What's the question in the next verse? Verse 13. Is Christ divided? Absolutely not. Was Paul crucified for you? Absolutely not. Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? No. And then here's a verse that the religious world abuses significantly, where it says, this is Paul saying, I thank God that I baptized none of you but Crispus and Gaius. And remember, we learned that Paul converted those two. Why would Paul thank God that he did not baptize any of them? That's interesting. Would a preacher say, I thank God I didn't baptize any of you? Why would he say that? That's exactly right. Remember the questions beforehand. I'm of Apollos. I'm of Paul. I've been baptized by this preacher. I've been baptized by this preacher. And so we've got preacher followers here. Okay? They loved this certain preacher. The preacher left, and so they were divided and wanted. That's not what we're supposed to be doing here. Okay? We have preacher followers. They only care about who's bringing the message, when the message is what ought to be emphasized. Not Brandon Greaves, not Greg Tinn, Kelly Webb, or anybody else. It's supposed to be the message, period. Doesn't matter. Okay? So we have preacher followers here. Paul said, I'm glad that I baptized any of you, because of your attitudes, you would go around and boast saying, well, Paul baptized me. Paul didn't want that. He didn't want that recognition there. Okay? So there was some problems there. And I wanted to address the problems at Corinth. Now, going back to 1 Corinthians 16 here, we have that phrase, upon the first day of the week, verses 1 and 2. Someone please read those two verses, please. Okay, so we now have another phrase, first day of the week. We are supposed to give as we have been prospered. On what day of the week? The first day of the week. So on Saturdays, when it's nice and hot outside and we got church camp coming up, our youth will organize a car wash so we can raise money so we can go to church camp. Is that authorized? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. On a Friday evening, okay, on a Friday evening, we've got to repair something in the building. We can't afford it ourselves, so we're going to call Swamp John's. Love Swamp John's. And then we're going to have a meal on Friday, and we're going to charge $10 a plate, and the money that we have is going to repair what we need to repair in this building. Is that authorized? I know we shouldn't do that. Listen, now I want to be careful at something, okay? There's a difference between Swamp John's benefiting the First United Methodist Church. That's a broad thing. That's an obvious no-no. Should not do that, okay? Because the proceeds goes into a treasury of a man-made organization. There's a Swamp John's meal in benefit of so-and-so who is dealing with cancer and needs to pay medical bills, but it's going to be in this building. I believe, my opinion, which is not binding, that's okay. Okay? Because it's just a building. The money's going towards medical bills to help somebody. But going towards a man-made organization, that's a no-no. Even though I love Swamp John's. I really do. It's a good place. Well, that's different. No, that's different. There's businesses that will directly put their money into a treasury of a church, but there's a business like what you own, okay? That's a personal business, not supporting directly to a church. So you'll see the signs out in the driving down the road, and you'll say Swamp John's benefits First United Methodist Church. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it. Or a mission trip for that. I mean, think about what you're doing. Somebody, I'm saying generally speaking, somebody's saying we're doing a mission trip, First United Methodist Church, and I'm just saying that in a general sense. There's millions of First United Methodist Church. I'm not talking about one specific one here. First United Methodist Church is sending a group to Jamaica for a mission trip, and we're raising money for that. Okay? Well, first off, we help them, one, to raise money for that. And when they're on the mission trip to Jamaica, what are they spreading? False doctrine. We cannot understate how damaging that is. That's what we're trying to get rid of. Okay? And some of us, and I'm not saying us, I'm saying us as Christians might look at that and say, well, that's a good thing, right? Not at all. Not at all. It's evil. Remember, those of us on Wednesday nights, we're talking about, in chapter 3, Paul is talking about who? Philippians chapter 3. Does anybody remember Wednesday? False teachers. And he's not light on the subject here. He calls them dogs, evil workers, of the concision, whose God is their belly, whose damage or the end is destruction. It leads to destruction. Even though we're looking at them and, hey, they're helping people out. But if it glorifies the man-made organization, okay, that's evil. That's evil. Okay, yes, sir.
My giving to St. Jude's children.
St. Jude, that's a great question. St. Jude, because you see the word saint, we automatically think, well, it's Catholic. Well, it's really not affiliated with anybody. And I hope you do donate to St. Jude. That's a great, great thing. Absolutely. But I'm not here to tell you who to donate to or nothing. That's your business. But I am going to give you a warning here. If we give money to a man-made organization to support that organization or their agenda, friends, that's sin. That's sin. And I mean that and I want to say that and warn that with love. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't say anything. But hey, get you some Swamp Johns. It's good, man. Don't just spend your money on whatever you want. But if it's supporting that, don't do it. Now, I say all that for I don't know what reason, because I'm not even talking about that today. But we're talking about the first day of the week, okay? We're talking about a binding example of worship. Our first day of the week is what? Sunday, okay? Now, we have, I don't know time zones. I should have looked this up. But, like, if it's 10:30 right now, is that clock working again? It is working. 10:30 right now here in Pulaski, Tennessee. What time is it in China? Aren't they like 12 hours ahead? Okay, so true or false, there'll become a time where it'll be Sunday here and a Monday there, right? Okay, so if it's the first day of the week, according to what our geography area is, I hope I said that correctly in a non-confusing way. If it's the first day of the week, that's when it's authorized. Okay, right there, first day of the week. Now, here's another question. How many first day of the weeks are there? There's one every week, right? And so notice what it didn't say. Please listen. Upon the first day of the week of every quarter. First day of the week, 2 or 3 times a year. First day of the week, which means every first day of the week. Now, I've been part of one of them organizations to where we would have it every quarter. To be honest with you, I was so young I didn't even realize how important it was. I wasn't really taught on the subject. Okay. And so that organization would observe what they called the Lord's Supper. Okay. Notice I'm trying to use these terms loosely. What they called the Lord's Supper every quarter. Now, you'll ask some of them today, what will they say? Why do you do that? Why don't you? What will they say? That is outrageous. If we do this, if we observe this, it will lose its meaning. Okay, several things about that. Number one, true or false, the Lord's Supper can lose its meaning for any of us, even if we take it every first day of the week. Why? Your heart has to be in the right spot. When we're observing the Lord's Supper, what are we doing here? What did Jesus say do? He said, do this in remembrance of me. Therefore, if we don't observe it, what is the tendency? We're going to forget. That's when it loses its meaning, okay? I appreciate that. Absolutely. All right. How are we supposed to give? As we've been prospered, but what Mary Lauren said is the first number one answer that we should all have in our hearts and minds right now, okay? If it's not right now, I'm going to go ahead and give you a pass. But we're supposed to give how? Cheerfully, not begrudgingly. And in order to give cheerfully, we must give from the... But if we do it every week, it'll lose its meaning.
I heard an illustration where this old gentleman dropped in $1 every week. On his way to church one Sunday, a fellow owed him $10 and paid him. So he stuck it down in his shirt pocket. When he donated, he mistakenly gave that $10 bill. He said the sad part of it is $9 I don't get no credit for.
Oh, yeah. Some will give with the wrong motive, maybe for tax cut reasons. I don't know. By the way, you can deduct that from your taxes if you didn't know that.
Hey, Brandon, do the churches that do their Lord's Supper quarterly take up an offering only quarterly?
Absolutely not. Exactly. That was the point. That's the point. Because those who only do or observe the Lord's Supper, or what they call it, quarterly, they still pass the collection plate every first day of the week. Because their mind's on material things. And not only that, apparently they're not given enough to where they have to do car washes to support their mission trips or their church camps or whatever, fill in the blank. If they're given cheerfully on the first day of the week and it's from their heart, it's how they've prospered, they should have already the money to do what we need to do. As a matter of fact, that's how we do it here. Okay? And so it's funny how I went on to giving. But the point is, in this lesson, verse 7, that first phrase there, Acts 20, upon the first day of the week. And you see, we have here the elements of the Lord's Supper ready to go at the appropriate time. Let me ask you this. Does it have to be at the very end? Can it be in the beginning? Okay. I've had some people ask me this. Why do we do it twice? We have it once in the AM and the PM, and then on the PM, those who didn't have the opportunity in the AM, take it in the PM. How come we all don't do it again? Yeah, you've already done it. You've already observed it, for one. And two, what if the elders decided to take that second hour and just connect it to the first hour in the first place? Well, we'd have to take it twice then? So does a break in between the worship hours have anything to do with why we have to do what we do every time? No, absolutely not. And so the PM, we offer it to those who did not have the opportunity to take it in the AM, okay? So any more questions about that? It's pretty simple. Just remember Acts 20 and verse 7 upon the first day of the week. There's a lot of significant events that happened on the first day of the week. Read Matthew 28 verse 1, somebody. There's a reason for this. It's so obvious. Sepulcher? I'm not even there. You beat me to it, Granddaddy. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulcher. Okay? Jesus' tomb. The sepulcher's a tomb. Our Lord's risen. He's no longer there. Okay? Also, the church was also established on the first day of the week. Do you know the day of Pentecost was on the first day of the week? How do you know that? Well, let's read some verses here. Let's go to Leviticus 23, 15 and 16. Verse 15, and ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath. What day was the Sabbath observed? The seventh day. The seventh day, okay? From the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. 7 Sabbaths. So it's seventh day, 7 Sabbaths. How many days is that? 49, okay? Even unto the morrow, verse 16, after the 7th Sabbath shall you number how many days? 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. 50. There's the number 5. The day of Pentecost, okay? There's a number that represents Pentecost. It's the 50th day, the day which is being spoken of right here in the book of Leviticus, okay? If Sabbath is on a Saturday, the day after is a 50th day. On what day was the church established? On the first day of the week, okay? And also we said the Lord's Supper is to be eaten, Acts 20 verse 7. And then we also talked about the collection of the saints is supposed to be done on the first day of the week, 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. Okay? So it's supposed to be on the Lord's day, the first day of the week, from the Lord's table. Let's read some more. Let's read some more verses here. All right, let's go to 1 Corinthians 11 and 20, just some more supporting here. It's supposed to be from the Lord's table. Some say, well, why can't I just worship at home? If that's your only option, yes, worship at home, okay, if that's your only option. Some of us can't help it. Some of us, I'm saying us, in the world, 100, 200 miles from the next congregation. You can't help it, okay? So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 20. Someone read that.
When you come together, therefore, into one place, this is not to eat the Lord's supper.
Okay. Remember one of the problems they were having? They were cliquey. They came together into separate places. They were not together to eat the Lord's Supper. They must be together because the Lord's table is where there's an assembly. Okay? Here's the Lord's table. We are assembled together. We are to observe the Lord's Supper or eat off the Lord's Supper off the Lord's table. Obviously, this table's not big enough for all of us to surround it, but you get the picture. It's a figurative thing, okay? We have a table here on the Lord's day, the Lord's Supper here. Okay, very good. Any questions on the first day of the week here?
Verse 29 addresses what you were talking about.
1 Corinthians 11.
He that eateth and drinketh unworthily eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body.
What do you think that means?
I mean, we're to have our mind on Christ.
That's exactly right. The previous verse. Let every man examine himself. Okay? Very good. Let him eat of that bread, drink of that cup, examine himself. You have your mind set on where it's supposed to be. Okay? Now, sometimes we'll have visitors who are not members of the Lord's church. and they will pick up part of that bread and that juice, and they observe it. Is that sinful? Well, they're already in sin because they're not members of the Lord's church, for one. But two, it's not going to automatically send them to eternal hell. Okay? What they're really just eating is a cracker and some juice. That's it. Okay? Some will take that and say, well, you can't take the Lord's Supper. Whoa, wait a minute. We can't be like that. Absolutely. I don't have the authority to determine who can take it and who can't. It's between them and God. Let every man examine who? Himself. I can't examine Raymond Pierce and determine whether or not he can take the Lord's Supper. That is not my situation. And if I tried to do that, I'm in sin. Okay? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Because we're not the judge, right? We're not. Okay? So it's between the person eating the cracker and drinking the juice. Okay.
When we give or do deeds, we got to remember what it's for and who it's for.
Sure.
It's all to the glory of the church. And so if we say or do or commit deeds that is not in that frame of mind, then that's where we have to really examine each thing we do.
Exactly right.
Uplift for the church.
Exactly right.
Take away from the meaning, it's going to harm the church reputation some way.
You know, we can give for the right reasons and still be wrong. For instance, say Greg Tennant wants to give, and it's for the right reasons. It's going to glorify God. It's going to glorify God. But then Greg Tennant goes around and says, look what I did. Okay? Which would shock me to death because I know Greg Tennant would never do that. All right? It's not to glorify Greg Tennant. It's to glorify God. Okay?
The deeds we do can give glory to something else, to the church too, like in a false way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very good. Any other questions? Appreciate the class. I love the first day of the week lesson. It's fun. I learned a lot when I converted. All right. Thank you for your time. Ring that bell on me next